Hi lovely booktubers, I'm Debs. Welcome back to my channel, Brain and Read Stuff. I am here in the book shack, a bit later than normal. A lot of stuff been going on this week. Elections in the UK, and as a former journalist, the best election result, i.e. change. Most local journalists I've found to tend to be floating voters. What they want most out of an election is change, because that's what makes the headlines. So yeah, be interesting to see how our new government shapes up. And then of course we've had the football, and probably the less said about that the better. Suffice to say, I think we got lucky, but there you go. Reading this week, I don't know. I sort of feel like I haven't had the best week, but there were some things that took up a lot of time. You know what I'm going to say? Ulysses by James Joyce. We are well into this. Well, we're well over halfway. We're probably 3/4 of the way through it now. The last 3 episodes we have will be read this week, next week, and the week after. So we are more than on schedule to finish in the time period that Greg from Another Bibliophile Reads and Al from Big Hard Books and Classics set out to start with. Last week, I think, was probably the most difficult, in that we read episode 15. Episode 15 is huge. It's the longest episode in the book. And it's a meld of fantasy scenes and real scenes. The problem is it isn't quite clear where one descends or ascends into another. I'm finding now this book is really interesting. I'm going to reserve judgment on whether or not I like it until we've finished. I've started this episode for this week, episode 16, and at least the start of it appears to be more clear than many of the episodes that I've read before. Alongside that, I am reading, oh, that's not good. I am reading the corresponding chapters for each episode from the Guide to James Joyce's Ulysses by Patrick Hastings. And it's invaluable, as is the support of our wonderful Discord group. Greg has dubbed us the Ulysses 6, and we comprise Greg and Al, and then Pat from Book Chat with Pat, Roy from Roy Reads Anything, Will from Will Chambers, and myself. We had another live chat last night, which I think, well, I know Greg recorded it, and I think he was going to put up today. For anyone who is interested, who knows, somebody might be. So this week is the beginning of July. As everybody who's been to this channel before is aware, I do a lot of events, and there are a lot of events going on in July. So my audiobook for this week was the Jane Austen Handbook, Proper Life Skills from Regency England by Margaret C. Sullivan. I read this for Jane Austen July. but also for Historathon, because Historathon dates are broken up to include Jane Austen July and also tie in with Victober later in the year. So we are currently reading non-fiction history from 1500 to 1820. The Jane Austen July prompt is to read a book of non-fiction about Jane Austen's times. This was actually really funny. It's done in a tongue-in-cheek way, but with a lot of historical facts in there. So it talks you through the niceties of Georgian life, um, what ladies do during the day, what the men folk are expected to do, the responsibilities of each of them, how to fill up your day when you have no discernible job, and no intention of getting one, how to bag yourself a respectable husband, preferably a rich one, equally how to bag yourself a rich wife. It's really quite funny, but I think it's written in the same vein as Jane Austen's novels are, in that it's highlighting the ridiculousness of some aspects of society. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. Next up, for Rocket Summer, which is an event from Michael K. Vaughan, we were asked this week to read science fiction, classic science fiction, from pre-1939. Next week is the 40s, the week after the 50s, the week after that is the 60s. I went quite early, and I went with The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, which I think is fabulous and is possibly one of the earliest time travel novels. As you would expect from H.G. Wells, it's brilliantly written. We have a cast of characters with no names in Victorian England. We have the time traveller. We have the journalist. We have the doctor. Um, they've gathered for dinner, this group of gentlemen at the time traveller's house. And he wants to tell them a story. He's built a time machine. And he has just used it to travel many, many, many millions of years into the future, where he was hoping to find a society that had matured and advanced. And instead, he found these lovely, smiley little people living in what looked like paradise, beautiful gardens, um, vegetarians eating from the copious produce, animals appear to have disappeared. But then his time machine goes missing. And he notices the structures around him are decaying, are falling apart. He comes across two species of people that humans have evolved into. Both quite small, but the surface people, the Eloi, are childlike, innocent, happy, smiley people. They spend their time in happy pursuits, art, sex. But he later discovers that beneath the surface there is another species, um, the Morlocks. And initially he thinks that they're the workers, they're the ones that are keeping this world going and providing for the elite. But it turns out to be a little more sinister than that. And this is Wells's reflection on the jewelled, layered society of Victorian England taken into the future. It's a very clever book. I learned something today. Pat at Book Chat with Pat also read this book. And I can't remember what she called it now. Damn, it was in my head 2 minutes ago. It's a narrative within a narrative. A framed narrative, that's what she called it. And Pat was an English teacher for many, many years. She knows these things. So you have the narrative of the time traveller hosting this dinner for his friends to explain all about his adventures. And then inside that, you have the narrative of the world he discovered, what the world has become. And his vision of the future. And the people at the dinner table have to decide whether or not they believe him. I loved this. It was brilliant. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to read for the 1940s for next week. Now, it's also Giallo July. And I had plenty of ideas for 3 of the 4 prompts for Giallo July. But not much for the cover in yellow. So I went with this. Shards of Shattered Dolls. And this is by J. Rocky Colavito. Apparently, the man is a teacher of creative writing. Now, I want to read you a little bit of this because it does explain quite well, I think, what Giallo is. It says Giallo came out of Italy. They were lurid crime paperbacks characterized by a bright yellow cover. The books transitioned into films, vile transgressive meditations on violent crime, appearance and reality, sociopathology, crime and punishment, all the sorts of things that curl hairs and curdle blood. The killers wore black and gloves exquisitely. The detectives often were everyday folk nagged by something that didn't quite make sense. And that's probably a good place to stop because this, for me, didn't quite make sense. This is what they call Neo Giallo. And like I say, I chose it just because it was a yellow cover. I was struggling to find things with yellow covers. I think this is less Giallo and more gore. The killings that take place in this are brutal, really brutal, and explicitly described. The only connection that I can see towards Giallo, which featured authors such as Agatha Christie, A. Milne, all sorts of classic crime authors. Their books were stylish. Their books had this often had this elegance about them. The only connection between those books, the original Giallo, and this, was that the killer was wearing black. Other than that, it was extreme gore. The other thing that it just vaguely irritated me, there were typos in it. There were a couple of typos in it. There were issues with typography. Giallo's better than that. It said in the blurb that there was a real twist at the end, but sadly I guessed it. I've never guessed the end of an Agatha Christie in my life, and I've been reading them for many decades. Yeah, it was a bit of a disappointment, really. I'm going to stick to the classics for the rest of the prompts for this. So those three are the only books I've read in the entirety this week. What I am doing is reading Rogue Herries, and this is an event that has been set up by Roy at Roy Reads Anything. I'm honoured to be one of the co-hosts. We are reading for Rogue July a book by Hugh Walpole called Rogue Herries, and this is Hugh Walpole was a hugely popular author in the Victorian era who has really fallen out of popularity for some reason. Rogue Herries is the first in the Herries Chronicles. It's set in the Lake District. Rogue Herries, the titular character, is flawed, markedly flawed. We see a lot of the story through the eyes of his son David. Rogue Herries is a womanizer, he's a gambler, he's a drinker, but David worships him, absolutely worships him. One of the things Walpole does really, really well is soak up the atmosphere of the Lake District. It's a place I know well and love. The countryside is beautiful, but it rains. There is a lot of rain in this book. There's a lot of mud in this book because the weather can be oppressive if you don't like that sort of thing. The writing is lovely. I'm really enjoying the writing style. I'm about halfway through. Now, Walpole wrote, I think there's 6 of these books altogether. He wrote The Chronicle of the Herries Family, which spans a couple of 100 years. There's 4 of those books. And I have every intention of reading all of them. I don't think I'm going to fit them all into July, but I would like to read them all. And then there are 2 prequels that he wrote to Rogue Herries. I'm hoping I should be finished probably by Tuesday with this, but I am thoroughly enjoying it. I'm also reading this for Historathon, The Story of Russia by Orlando Figes. I did have, I have still got A Short History of Russia up there. That was the book I had earmarked to read this quarter for Historathon because I want to read Orlando Figes' Natasha's Dance and whatever the one about the Russian Revolution is. What's it called? Words escape me. A People's Tragedy. I have both of those, and I really want to read both of those. But I know my knowledge of Russian history is limited, and I wanted to start off with a wider, broader history of Russia. So I was going to read the one that's up there, and then, because I don't know what's on my bookshelves, I came across this one. So I started reading this. It's really good. Figers writes well, very clearly. It's very accessible. I've also started Mansfield Park, which is my choice for Jane Austen July, and also fits in with the retro romance event going on as well. So that's it. That's my reading for this week. I haven't got any further with June because I completely abandoned it, but I will finish June Messiah and then move on to the Children of June. Um, Hopefully, this week coming will be a little less chaotic. Tomorrow, I intend to do a wrap up finally of my Q2 Historathon books. That will be for the period 500 to 1500. Um, Apologies about overloading you with videos in the last week. There's been a lot to say. I will also I also plan to do at least one more book tag this week because I've got to catch up at some point. So that's it. Thank you for stopping by. Always lovely to see you. I very much appreciate your dropping in. I will speak to you for those who are interested in Historathon tomorrow. Um, Thank you for watching, and bye for now.